So in this video, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to provide you with an alternate way of dealing with the rules for significant figures. If you watch this video and it doesn't really help you and you'd rather just follow the rules that I gave you in class, the 3 rules, and those make sense to you, great. You can just ignore this video and everything in it. But for some people, this might be a more sensible way to do it, where you don't have the 3 rules. There's kind of 1 or 2 rules depending on how you look at it, but it's just thinking about it in a different way. So the way this rule works, it's called the Pacific Atlantic rule, and I'll explain what that means in just a second. But first of all, if we take a look at the United States, right? The Pacific Ocean is over here on the west coast, and the Atlantic Ocean is over here on the right. So this is the right and the left, Pacific and Atlantic. So in terms of the significant figures rule, we're going to use the P and the A to mean something slightly different. Okay, P stands for present, and A stands for absent. And what that means specifically is the decimal point. Okay, the decimal point is talked about in the 3 rules that we've gone over already. Again, this is just a slightly different way of tackling the problem of counting significant figures. And the only thing that we're going to focus on is whether the decimal point is present or absent. Okay, and what we do with that depends on those 2 factors. So let's take a look at a number. The number, let's say 205,000. Okay, so we could go through the 3 rules, right? We know that the numbers that aren't zeros are significant. The numbers in between, the zeros in between 2 other significant figures are significant. And the 3rd rule, which again is the one that kind of trips people up sometimes, is that the trailing zeros in a number with a decimal point are significant. Without a decimal point, they're not significant. So in the case of this particular number, these 3 zeros, since there's no decimal point at the end, or anywhere in the number, those are not significant. So here's the Pacific Atlantic rule way of doing this. If the decimal point is present, we would start counting with the first non-zero number on the left, which is where the Pacific is. Since the decimal point is absent, we're going to start on the right, where the Atlantic is, and we're going to move across the number and start counting when we get to something that's not a 0. So the first number we come to that's not a 0 is the 5, and then we continue counting every number after that, moving this way. So we start on the A because the decimal point is absent. We move from right to left. We start counting when we get to the first digit that's not a 0, and we count everything beyond that to the left. So in this case, that would be, again, 3 significant figures because we don't count these when the decimal point is absent. Okay? If the decimal point is present, so let's take a look at a number like 0.0004206. Okay, decimal point is present. So I'm going to start on the Pacific side, which is the left side. I will not start counting figures until I hit the first thing that's not a 0. So don't count this, don't count this, don't count this. Okay, there's the first digit that's not a 0. Starting from the left to the right, I'm going to now continue counting everything beyond that, no matter what it is. So I'm going to count the 2, the 0, the 6. Okay, so that has 4 significant figures. When the decimal point is present, we start on the left. We start with the first number that's not a 0 and count everything beyond that. When the decimal point is absent, we start on the right, start counting with the first non-zero number, and count everything to the left of it beyond that. Okay, so let's take a look at one of those numbers that would, okay, so another number like this, let's say 0.0103500000. Okay, so there's a lot of zeros here. Normally, again, with the three rules, we could work our way through it. But with the Pacific and Atlantic rule, there's really just one thing to look for. Decimal point. It's present. So I'm going to start on the right. I'm not going to count this. I'm not going to count this. There's the first number that's not a zero, counting from moving from left to right. Once you hit that first non-zero digit, everything to the right counts. You don't even have to worry about whether it's a zero or not. Count every digit to the right. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Plus the one that we started with, that's a total of 8 significant figures. Now again, in the three rules, we'd say, okay, the 1, the 3, and the 5, those count because they're not zero. The 0 in between the 1 and the 3 counts because it's a sandwich 0. And then these 4 zeros over here count because they're trailing zeros in a number with a decimal point. But sometimes that gets confusing to people because there's 4 zeros. How many do I count? Do I count them all? With the Pacific Atlantic rule, present or absent, you don't even have to worry about that. You just start on the left if it's present, count every number after that, after the first non-zero digit. If we just did it like this and took the decimal point away, now this is 10,350,000. Okay, so those are commas, not decimal points, just to be clear. Decimal point in this case is absent. So I'm going to start on the right. Don't count it, don't count it, don't count it, don't count it. Boom, there's my first digit that's not a zero. And I continue moving to the left, and I count everything to the left. So that has 4 significant figures. In this number, these are what we call these the placeholder zeros, so we don't count them as significant. Decimal point absent, start on the right. Decimal point present, start on the left. So again, that's just a quick alternate way to do the significant figures. If it works, great, use it. You'll be right if you use it and you use it correctly. If you'd rather just stick with the 3 rules and those make sense to you, great, use those. Whatever works, I'm happy either way. Just remember to count your significant figures.